Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. I really appreciate your time. Within the last couple days, WikiLeaks has released more emails from Podesta, Hillary Clinton's campaign manager, and a lot of people just seem to be glossing over it, like the sheeple can't be bothered with the truth. And I'm sure if you're like me, you might know somebody, whether they're in your family or not, who doesn't search out the truth on their own, and they believe that Hillary Clinton is this great being who just does wonderful stuff. Well, as it pertains to the love of myself and yourself, if you're watching this, if you're a member of my channel, it's obviously the Second Amendment. Whether you're a hunter, you're a competitive shooter, a police officer, military, or somebody who just likes to carry for personal protection, like whatever, you're here because you love the Second Amendment. Now, an email came out which showed in Hillary's own text that she plans on using executive action once she's president, if she's president. Hopefully she's not, but she plans on using this executive order to instill common sense gun control. And what she wants to instill is making gun makers liable, gun sellers liable for the deaths of these weapons. Now, I want to show you this clip here. This is an interview from June. It's a couple months old, but it was ABC's George Stephanopoulos interviewed Hillary Clinton, and he pressed her on the Second Amendment question. So I'm going to roll that right here. It's about 2 minutes long. Please stick through because this is some stuff you need to see and hear.
Let's talk about the Second Amendment. As you know, Donald Trump has also been out on the stump talking about the Second Amendment, saying you want to abolish the Second Amendment. I know you reject that, but I want to ask you a specific question. Do you believe that an individual's right to bear arms is a constitutional right, that it's not linked to service in a militia?
I think that for most of our history, there was a nuanced reading of the Second Amendment until the decision by the late Justice Scalia. And there was no argument until then that localities and states and the federal government had a right, as we do with every amendment, to impose reasonable regulations. So I believe we can have common sense gun safety measures consistent with the Second Amendment. And in fact, what I have proposed is supported by 90% of the American people and more than 75% of responsible gun owners. So that is exactly what I think is constitutionally permissible. And once again, you have Donald Trump just making outright fabrications, accusing me of that is absolutely untrue. But I'm going to continue to speak out for comprehensive background checks, closing the gun show loophole, closing the online loophole, closing the so-called Charleston loophole, reversing the bill that Senator Sanders voted for and I voted against, giving immunity from liability to gun makers and sellers. I think all of that can and should be done, and it is, in my view, consistent with the Constitution.
And the Heller decision also does say there can be some restrictions, but that's not what I asked. I said, do you believe that their conclusion that an individual's right to bear arms is a constitutional right?
If it is a constitutional right, then it, like every other constitutional right, is subject to reasonable regulations.
She just said, or refused to say, that it's a constitutional right, which means she doesn't think it is.
And what people have done with that decision is to take it as far as they possibly can and reject what has been our history from the very beginning of the Republic, where some of the earliest laws that were passed were about firearms. So I think it's important to recognize that reasonable people can say, as I do, responsible gun owners have a right. I have no objection to that. But the rest of the American public has a right to require certain kinds of regulatory responsible actions to protect everyone else.
All right, so this interview is like so telling, but she didn't really say much. Okay, you saw he pressed her, he asked her about the Second Amendment. What she said was, prior to the Heller decision, led by Justice Scalia, who, the document trail indicates she might have had him assassinated, but through his decision, prior to his decision, where she led, the Supreme Court's decision, that there was a nuanced reading of the Second Amendment. But what she doesn't say is about, well, leading up to that time where the decision had to be made, you know, the liberals and the globalists hadn't really put a lot of effort into the gun control movement. They hadn't really tried to disarm America because their phase of their implementation of their agenda hadn't gotten that far yet. But that's where it got, and if you're familiar with the Heller decision, there's a whole bunch of other stuff that's involved in it. But that decision made it clear that the Second Amendment was a personal Second Amendment right for the individual to keep and bear arms. Then Clinton goes on to say that 90% of Americans and more than 75% of responsible gun owners agree with what she's proposed. Now, if you are one of those people who have the wool over your eyes, let me make sure there's no wool here. Nope, I can see clearly. Let me put it to you in other words. Let me put it to you in simpler terms. She wants to make Glock responsible for any death that a Glock caused. You know, the Glock didn't cause it, folks. The gun didn't cause it. It's the moron who's pulling the bang switch that kills people. Gun is an inanimate object. It can't do anything by itself. We've all gone over that. But this is what she wants to do. She wants to make Smith & Wesson liable for any killing, murder, whatever it is, suicide, that the person used a Smith & Wesson. How stupid can this be? Let me dumb it down for you even more. There's a car crash on the highway, and unfortunately somebody dies. Do we hold Ford responsible because the person was in their car when they died? No, that's just ludicrous. Do we say, Honda, Chevy, there was a car crash involving one of your vehicles and 4 people died. You are now liable for their deaths. Of course not. That's ridiculous. It's not, it's stupid. It's not common sense that these liberals keep pushing, and it's just not the American way. That's not how we do it. Let's go even further. Somebody's at a restaurant and they eat a hot dog. It gets lodged in their throat and they choke and die because nobody there knows anything anymore because they all believe what they're fed, so nobody knows the Heimlich maneuver anymore, okay? That person dies. Do we go sue Oscar Mayer or KM because their hot dog caused that death? No, of course not. The person didn't chew the food properly. It gets lodged in their throat, and unfortunately, they succumb to their injury. It's just mind-blowing that these people are preaching this, and people are gobbling it right up. Oh, yeah, comments. Oh, yeah, we want this. This is great. Next, the best thing since sliced bread. One other example. Do we say, hey, Farberware? Or, hey, Ginsu? You guys are liable for all the deaths that are caused using your blades. You think Kershaw wants that to happen? No, nobody wants that to happen. No single common sense loving American would say that that's even remotely the way things should be done. What she's implying, what she's saying, it's coded. You need to see the truth. They want to bankrupt the gun manufacturers. They want to bankrupt them so that they'll go out of business. Because if they're out of business, who's going to make guns? They want to bankrupt the people who sold the gun. Because, hey, you sold that and it caused a death. You know, it wasn't the idiot who pulled the trigger. It wasn't the mental health issue that caused the person to want to kill people. It's that firearm. Because we all know if there were no guns, nobody would get killed, right? Because every caveman lived a very long life, right? It's so stupid. One other telling thing, Clinton always says, my view. This is my view. Honey, we don't care about your view because it's not a dictatorship. That would matter if you were a dictator. This is a constitutional republic. You don't get to impose your view. Wake up, folks. She just told you right there what she plans on doing. My view. And one last thing, right at the end of the video, she made mention of this is how it was in the history of from the beginning of the Republic. It's funny, she doesn't really remember anything she was taught in school, because I remember history says the beginning of the Republic was some tyrants were forcing things on the colonists, and they got sick and tired of it. And they kept pushing, the tyrants kept pushing and ramming stuff down their throat. Taxes, gun control, they tried to take the guns. So we revolted, and we used our firearms to ensure our freedom. And that's what history tells us. From the beginning of the Republic, our firearms, we the people, the militia, use our firearms to keep You want to be dictators at bay. Good luck with your agenda, Mrs. Clinton. I don't think it's going to end well for you. America, wake up. If you like this video, please hit that like button and send it to all your friends, because this needs to get out. Okay, this interview is from June, and not a lot of people know about it. But these emails just came out the other day, and really nobody knows about it. Pass it on. If you like this stuff, please hit the subscribe button. I put out stuff like this as fast as I can, and I hope you do. Until we see each other again, be safe, stay vigilant, and carry your weapon. Take care, everybody.